current head of the Special Investigations Unit, Advocate Andy Mutibbe, has been appointed with effect from the 1st of February 2026 as the new National Director of Public Prosecutions. For more on this, we are now joined in studio by my colleague Zoleka Qodashe to give us a bit more. Zoleka, this is the breaking news story this hour, but very interesting. The panel said none of the candidates were suitable. So many are asking this evening, why did the president then go ahead and appoint someone?
Well, you'll remember, good evening, Nhlanhla, good evening to the viewers. You'll remember that essentially the advisory panel was an ad hoc process, right? In terms of the Constitution, that's Section 179, subsection 1 of the Constitution, as well as Section 10 of the National Prosecuting Act. The President is empowered to appoint a National Director of Public Prosecutions. So essentially what he's always maintained is that the advisory panel is really a process to ensure that there's transparency in the work, or really in the appointment of the NDPP, and that's why there was such a process. And so he is not bound by the recommendations or the report of the advisory panel. Instead, he has a discretion to choose whoever he wants essentially to be the NDPP. And that's the distinction that must be made between the advisory panel process as well as the appointment that's been made by the president. But yes, he's appointed the current SIU head as the next NDPP from effect the 1st of February 2026. But also you remember that there were 6 candidates that were interviewed by the advisory panel on the 10th and 11th of December 2025. And so essentially, the advisory panel, when it submitted its report to the president on the 12th of December, saying that none of the candidates that appeared before it were suitable for appointment.
But Zoleka, there has been a story that's been brewing in the past few days about lawyers challenging this appointment in court. So what exactly are they saying was done wrong in this process?
Well, that urgent interdict is an application that was filed by B. Kulu and Partners Incorporated, seeking to interdict the president or halt the process or the appointment of an NDPP. You'll remember that they had argued that the process was not fair insofar as it's related to Advocate Cronje. You remember the inaugural head of the investigating directorate. Yes, and so they had argued that because there's a long-standing matter between that legal firm as well as Advocate Cronje, and so they had said that the objection that they had filed against Cronje's candidacy essentially was not given to her, and that she did not have an opportunity, or rather the process was prejudicial because every other candidate, you remember there were 6 candidates, the 5 other candidates had their opportunity to essentially have their objections against them to be ventilated. You remember, in fact, with the interview of the current IDAC head, that's Advocate Andrea Johnson, she had about 208 objections against her candidacy. And so those were fully ventilated before the advisory panel and when she was conducting, or the interview was conducted. And so they say that that was not done in the interview of Advocate Cronje. And so that is why they wanted the process to be interdicted. But there are arguments that that particular application could be moot because now the president didn't consider, or rather considered the application, or rather the report by the advisory panel, but that also found that even Advocate Cronje was not suitable for appointment. And so insofar as that urgent application, it may not see the light of day.
Some would have argued that maybe the president should have waited for the court's decision on this matter. But I also want us to look at the bigger picture here, especially on the fight against corruption in this country. The appointment of Advocate Mutibbe, what does this appointment mean, especially for the fight against corruption?
Well, what the NPA Act stipulates is that the NDPP, and in fact, all those officials within the NPA must be fit and proper for the job, right? And so that is the basic tenet of what the prosecuting authority, and you'll remember that there has been criticism over the work of the NPA and whether it's been able to rid itself of those alleged elements that have allegedly infiltrated the NPA insofar as its ability to be independent, because the NPA is supposed to be independent, particularly against any sort of political interference. And in fact, we've heard from the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, that's Zoleka Qodashe, saying that during her tenure, she hasn't experienced anything of that nature in relation to the current head of the NPA. But of course, it is a critical appointment given the current lack of public trust within the NPA, which will have, of course, significant effects as well as the NPA continues with its functions in prosecuting serious and various other crimes.
Zoleka, the name Andy Mutibbe, some of us might be familiar with it, but some would argue they might not know Advocate Mutibbe. What experience does he then bring that makes him suitable for this role? Those are some of the questions that I imagine.
Well, the Advocate Mutibbe is not new to the prosecutorial space. In fact, he's been in various magistrates' courts within Johannesburg. He's been a prosecutor himself. So that's not a space that he's completely unfamiliar with. And so he's also an advocate. And so that wealth of experience that he will have, particularly because he is the current head of the SIU, so it's expected that that kind of anti-corruption stance that is portrayed within the SIU will be infused as well within the NPA.
Zoleka, let me thank you so much for helping us make sense of this breaking news story. Advocate Mutibbe being appointed the new NDPP for South Africa.